If you want to know how to play against the close Sicilian, then stick around. I've got a great game to show you. Or maybe you play the close Sicilian with white and you want to see what some of your opponents might be hitting you with. So it would be good to know that as well. So I was sent in this game by Alex Peeters. He's 21 years old, he's from Belgium, and he plays for KOSK, the Koninklijke Ostendse Schachkring. That's the Royal Ostend Chess Club to you and me, and what a chess club it is. I've had some great times there. So Alex played my recommendation against the close Sicilian, and it worked out very well. He followed my recommendation in my anti-Sicilians book, or maybe he'd seen got the Chessable course. So it's very interesting for me to see how my theoretical recommendation works out in practice. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. Let's take a look at this game. Johan de Saegher against Alex Peeters, and this game was played in the Gent Open 2026 in July. Gent is a very attractive town in West Flanders, and they have an annual open tournament there. So here we go. Close Sicilian, and you could say that this is the starting position. Move order is really important for black. So first of all, note that the D pawn has been advanced, not the E pawn, one of these squares. It's most accurate to move the pawn to D6 because we don't yet know whether this E pawn belongs on E6 or E5, or sometimes it doesn't move at all. So this is the most accurate move. Now, white has basically three continuations here. F4, as played in this game, bishop E3, and knight E2. And you have to watch out and play accordingly with black. If white plays bishop E3, then E5 is appropriate, and knight E7. So this is a very sound setup. You could call it the Botvinnik setup. And one of the main lines runs like this. Normally, if white plays bishop E3, then they follow up with queen D2 and go for bishop H6. But actually, this gives black excellent counterplay. If knight E2, then don't go E5, because after knight D5, well, this knight occupies E5 and this can be a bit boring. Lots of pieces get exchanged. Best thing to do against knight E2 is play E6 and knight E7, and black controls D4. If bishop E3 ever comes, then normally you can just play knight D4. And if F4, okay, do you play E6 or E5? This is always the question. Against F4, don't play E5, because then white plays knight H3. And there's a little trick here. If both sides castle, then white plays F5. This is incredibly dangerous. And if this pawn is taken, then white sacks the exchange. This is a well-known trap. Actually, white has a tremendous attack here. Okay, so just to repeat, if bishop E3, you play E5. If knight E2, you play E6. And if F4, you play E6. Okay, white plays knight F3, knight E7. And white castles and black castles, and then bishop E3. So this is almost the main position, the starting position of the F4 variation. And there have been hundreds of games played from this point. Now, it used to be thought that the best move here was knight D4. It was assumed that white is threatening D4, and that is a kind of successful transposition into a kind of open Sicilian where this bishop is misplaced. And knight d4 is indeed playable, but you have to be very careful of this move at e5. Spassky used to play like this. It's an interesting continuation. Black has to be very switched on there. So I prefer b6. And this is quite a tricky move. Now, this is a useful move, of course, because this bishop can come out to either b7 or a6. If white plays d4, here's the point. You play d5. And this is problematic for white, because if pawn takes pawn on c5, d4 wins a piece. And if e takes d5, you play knight f5, hitting the bishop, and then knight c takes d4. And that knight is beautifully positioned, supported by these pieces. Instead, in this game, white played queen d2. Okay, a normal close Sicilian move. d5 anyway. So apart from giving the bishop some room, playing the pawn to b6 supports the pawn on c5, which enables this move d5. And this is very annoying for white because already threatens d4, forking these pieces. If the bishop drops back to f2, then black can exchange on e4. Very annoying move, because if knight takes pawn, you can simply whip off the pawn on b2. And if pawn takes pawn, this endgame is actually very pleasant for black. Black's pieces are superbly placed. And, you know, rook in the middle, knight d4. Black is better. So after d5, white exchanged on d5. Well, that's already quite a big concession. E takes d5, still threatening this move. And also this square is perhaps available. Bishop f2. Now, I mean, you could play this in various ways, but Alex goes for d4. I should say this is still exactly as I recommended in the book. And I like this very much for black because already it looks to me like black is better because of this wonderful space advantage. Knight e4. And this knight gets pushed around. Has to go to g5. After h6, it has to go back to h3. Now this is not good. You can see that white's pieces tread on each other's toes here. The bishop doesn't really have any prospects on f2. But then again, where does this knight on h3 move to? And now black completes development. Bishop e6. And rook ae1. So Alex said that up to here, this was all his preparation. And basically, this is about as far as I got in the book. And my conclusion was, well, black has a really pleasant position because of this space advantage. You can see that black can use the d5 square for the bishop, perhaps a knight later on. And that pawn on d4 gives black excellent cover. And in the meantime, what exactly is white doing? I mean, these pieces are so bottled in. I can think of lots of things for black to do here, but for white, it's tough. a3 played. Queen d6, very good. So just building up nicely, connecting the rooks. And, well, as I've indicated there with the arrows, I think black has a very simple plan here. And that's just to squeeze on the queen side with the pawns. So advance the b and a pawns. We'll put the pawn on a4. Sometimes you can play for c4. Sometimes you play for b4. But it's quite clear that lines are going to open and black can start to think about creating a weakness, perhaps invading on the b file. So white was stuck. So c4 played. Well, there's no need to retreat the bishop. This can just be taken. So you could say that, well, maybe white has achieved something because with the disappearance of the pawn on d4, then this bishop on f2 has a little bit more scope. Nevertheless, this is a strong pawn chain, and these pawns are vulnerable. So this is still very pleasant for black. And, well, just look at the coordination of black's pieces. Just superb. So now there's pressure here. Therefore, white played rook d1, supporting the d pawn. Right. Here is where I would like you to have a think. I'm going to have a drink from my lovely tea mug. So how do you play with black in this position? Black to play. See you after this message. I've seen many chessboards in my life, but when I heard about this one, I was keen to see it for myself. It's beautiful and completely wireless, thanks to an integrated battery and Bluetooth connection. For my edition, I wanted pieces that reflect clarity. When I play with them, everything feels natural. Just me, the board, and the game I love. This is my supreme chess set, the Daniel King edition. There's a nice little tactic for black in this position. That's bishop b3, attacking the rook. The rook moves away, and then the bishop bounces back to c4. So obviously, yeah, that pawn is in big trouble. It's possible to take, but then queen takes queen and rook takes. Now, at the moment, material is still level, but this pawn is vulnerable. The rook is superbly placed on the second rank. And you never know, this knight could leap to a5 to look at that weakened pawn. And there's no doubt that black is better. But Alex writes, blijkbaar was deze variant beter, maar ik wilde geen loperpaar opgeven in zo'n goede stelling. There you are, clear as mud. So, apparently this variation was better, but I didn't want to give up the bishop pair in such a good position. Yeah, I can understand why he was thinking like that, because this light squared bishop rules the world. And even, well, the bishop on f2 is still pretty bad, and the knight on f2 is still pretty bad. But yeah, I can understand why he was maybe a little bit reluctant to go in for this. It is very good for black, however. So instead of that, and I think this takes guts, instead of just plunging in, instead of that, he played rook e8. He just wasn't feeling it. And he thought, well, I'll just hold the position. So I think that's a very reasonable decision, actually. Rook e1 played, because there's no doubt that black is more comfortable here. So he didn't leap in at the first opportunity. That's brave. Rook came to b1 and the bishop came back to f7. So the d3 pawn is attacked, and rook d1, and now rook d7. So very simple. He's just going to bring another major piece, the next rook, in line here just to create more pressure on d3. a4, rook d8. Black's pieces are so well coordinated. It's a lovely position. Bishop f1, that's a pretty sad move to have to play. But where's the breakthrough for black? Knight d5. Okay, that looks like a very good move. So now the c3 pawn is attacked. That was defended. And now the queen came to f6. More pressure. And then bishop e1 was played. Well, that really is miserable. You know, those bishops look pretty bad, and now they're even worse. My word. I think instead of bishop e1, the best chance was to play d4. And it looks very risky, obviously, to play the pawn here when, You know, there are so many black pieces lined up against it. Nevertheless, it's still not so clear. White is hanging on in there, and you never know, this bishop might come out at some moment. Black is better, but it's not over yet. Anyway, after bishop e1, it's pretty miserable. Rook e7, that's a nice switch back to the e-file. This knight finally comes into the game, but knight e3, beautiful. Do we call that an octopus knight? I think we do. Yeah, it's an octopus knight. Deep in the heart of White's territory, supported by the rooks, and it looks in all directions very unpleasant for White to meet that. I think White is now lost because that bishop is just so vulnerable. The bishop moved away, yeah, after doubling on e-file, then there's a clear threat to move the knight and then rook takes bishop. So bishop f1, bishop d5, still using that d5 square. Bishop g2, an exchange on g2. Whoa, this is terrible now. Terrible pin. And that was the end of that. The best White can do is give up the queen. But then, well, Black takes it and takes on c3. Black's ahead on material, and that pin is absolutely fatal. So well played, Alex. And it just shows that if you get the first few moves right, if you really understand the move order and the nuances in some positions, then it really pays off. And I think that's particularly so in this position. So I'm just going to repeat that. If f4, you go e6. If bishop e3, you go e5. And if knight e2, you go e6. If you want details, then do check out my anti-Sicilians for black. And there's a Chessable course on it as well.